Good morning, lovelies. I'm Sia Melangi, fantasy author and content creator, and today we are talking about paranormal tropes. More specifically, my top 10 favorite. Now, you're probably wondering where your Cafe Latte compilation is. It is on its way. My video editor, Nick, needed to spend some time with this other job for a couple of weeks, and I thought I would take the opportunity to go back to the old school Alonji YouTube videos back when I did writing advice and favorite or least favorite tropes when the quality of those videos was questionable at best. So here we are. I also wanted to do it on like my actual expensive camera that I never use anymore, but like an idiot, I forgot to charge the battery. You can trust me, I'm a professional content creator. Paranormal is a genre that, theoretically, it talks about people or events like telekinesis, clairvoyance, ghosts, Bigfoot, etc. that is beyond normal scientific understanding. In the literary and movie world, this has expanded to include old folk tales that used to be considered fact, but now most people don't think they're actually real. Vampires, werewolves, fairies, demons, etc. Those creatures also show up in a lot of urban fantasy, which has a ton of overlap with the paranormal genre to the point that they're almost interchangeable. Paranormal is actually not my usual genre of choice. I know. Normally, I really only go for the genre if it is specifically paranormal horror. Ghosts and possession stories are the main culprit here. They're some of my favorite horror movies. I tend to prefer outright urban or even better epic fantasy, where the entire world is completely made up. Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, Stormlight Archive, that's epic fantasy, and that is my usual jam. Weird how these things turn out, right? Now, having said that, I do enjoy the odd paranormal book and movie, and I'm certainly having fun creating this kind of story myself. Speaking of which, if you want to see a Cafe Latte book on the shelves, I'm going to be self-publishing Heart of Iron in 2025, and I will need your help to do it. There's going to be a crowdfund campaign on Kickstarter starting this February. You can sign up for my newsletter in the description or subscribe to this channel for updates. If you have no idea what Cafe Latte is, hi, welcome to the party. It is my TikTok series about a cafe run by fairies. It tends to be pretty fluffy, slice of life with a bit of herd comfort. The book, Heart of Iron, it's actually going to be a bit more action adventure and a little darker because I am incapable of writing fluffy, long-form content. I need me some of that grit. Both mediums are queer and full of crazy magical bullshit, so check out the links in my description. Let's get into my top 10 favorite paranormal tropes, why they're awesome, and how anyone who disagrees with me is objectively wrong. Number 1, Murderous Ghosts. Ghosts and demons are some of the scariest monsters, in my opinion. I have a black belt, and I know how to use a gun, bow, knife, and sword, so the more physical villains like serial killers and monsters, they aren't much of a threat. They're just not as scary for me. I know how to handle them. At the very least, I'll give them a fight. But a being that's already dead, that is immune to bullets and roundhouse kicks, how the hell do you defend against that? You don't. I know they're not real, I'm not a believer, but the idea of it still freaks me out. Give me an angry ghost or a tricky demon and I am glued to that screen. Number 2, scary monsters that no one wants to have sex with. Maybe it's just me being aromantic, asexual, but why do we have to make everything fuckable? Why does everything have to be sexy, especially in a horror movie? I'm looking to be terrified, not aroused. I'll click on a different type of movie for that. 30 Days of Night is one of my favorite examples of modern horror movie villains that are not sexy in any way. The movie is based on a graphic novel, they're both good, and it hit the big screen during the Twilight craze. In an age of vampires dominating the romance genre, these guys are pure predators. They're not tortured over the morality of eating humans, they're just there to eat, and nothing's gonna stop them. Number 3, cute, non-sexy monsters. As much as I like a traditionally scary monster, I also love me some trope subversion. Werewolves who are big puppies, demons who are dorks and also really nice, witches that are sweet grandmas, right up until you mess with their grandbabies. I guess in my case, Nicole's a little too young to be a grandma, but Bob is over 1,000 years old, even if she doesn't have any children or grandchildren. Does she count? I feel like she counts. The possibilities of cuteness here are endless, and they can still tear off a human's limbs if you need to see some blood and gore in your paranormal. Number 4, mean angels. More trope subversion. This is obviously specific to the Christian subgenre of paranormal where demons and angels walk among us, think Constantine or Supernatural. Because angels are associated with God, we automatically assume that they're good, nice, helpful. But I'm a Buddhist who doesn't believe in God, so subvert that trope and give me some angels that are mean, antagonistic, maybe even evil. Number 5, when writers remember that Christianity is not the only religion with creepy monsters. It is not always well executed, especially when the writer is white with a Christian background and is turning another belief system into something evil and primitive and scary to the nice white girl stumbling into the Asian or African or indigenous otherworld. Stereotypes do not make for good storytelling. But every now and then, Hollywood gets it right. In fact, it's more common for books in the literary world to get it right than Hollywood. Sometimes you get stories where every religion is real and the beings of all these pantheons are dealing with each other, which is pretty fun. It's kind of like a everything but the kitchen sink type of storytelling, and I do like that. This might technically be going into urban fantasy, but as I've said, there's a ton of overlap between that and paranormal, so let's roll with it. I've been seeing this on TikTok a lot, the idea that every belief system is true and coexists, and that your afterlife is determined by what you believe. Hell's Bells is my favorite example of this. Christians go to heaven or hell, Buddhists and Hindus are reincarnated, neo-pagans wind up in Valhalla or Hades or wherever. I mean, hell, I myself had a short-lived TikTok series where Jesus and Buddha hung out and were pals. It's always nice to see diversity and to break from the same old Western molds that we've been stuck with for centuries. Number 6, girl power. I don't know if it's because of the horror movies final girl trope, the fact that most of the paranormal genre is femme-dominated romance, or some other reason that I'm just not smart enough to see, but whatever it is, the main character or the majority of their friend group is usually women. They're not always well written, but just by sheer numbers, you're more likely to find a well-written femme protagonist in the paranormal genre than most any other genre. Now, we just need to add some more queer, disabled, neurodivergent, and POC rep, and we're golden. Number 7, the monster hunter. In a world of darkness and danger, give me a hero willing to fight it. Paranormal monster hunters are usually dark and broody, often some flavor of anti-hero, which is not usually my shtick, but sometimes it works out. Sometimes the monster hunter is a monster themselves, like half vampire or whatever, but I personally like the monster hunters that are just plain old human. That is a regular sack of meat and bones going against immortal vampires, bloodthirsty werewolves, and powerful demons from another realm. The odds are so stacked against their favor, and I want to see how they come out on top. Honestly, this is a cross-genre favorite of mine. I love seeing regular people existing and fighting in worlds dominated by magic and superpowers. Robin and Batman, Sokka, Trevor Belmont, they tend to be some of my favorite characters. Number 8, historical setting. In the modern setting, we have the internet to help us strategize, cars to make a quick getaway, and a shit ton of guns. Too many, honestly. 17th century colonists? Not so much. As a history major, I find that these can be a double-edged sword because what Hollywood thinks is historically accurate and what is actually historically accurate are two very different things. But there are a lot of creators out there who know how to do some basic research, and when they do that, combining a novel historical setting with terrifying paranormal creatures, or even just regular paranormal creatures, I am all over it. It makes a simple, overdone concept like zombies or vampires or fairies suddenly new and all the more terrifying because they're in a different setting that is not equipped to deal with them as a modern, gun-toting American. And on top of that, the characters usually have to deal with whatever sexism, racism, and any other relevant ism is going on in their time period, which makes surviving the monsters even harder. Speaking of which, number 9, social commentary. Check it off your Alonji bingo card. Most paranormal monsters have their roots in human or societal struggles. The Wendigo, I'm pretty sure that is a mispronunciation, but it's the only one I know, I am sorry, is the product of cannibalism that happened when hunters are desperate enough to turn into monsters by turning against each other, a serious threat to the indigenous cultures that came up with it. The werewolf is a personification of the beast within. Ghosts are literally remnants of the past that must be conquered if we want to have a future. Zombies started out as a Haitian myth and were victims, not villains. The corpses of slaves, forced to continue to work for their cruel master, unable to be freed from their horrors of slavery, even in death. And then Hollywood hijacked it, making the enslaved people of color the villains. That right there is a metaphor. This is not a new concept, so don't come at me with the social justice snowflakes are ruining stories. This has been happening since storytelling was a thing. Lovecraft Country did this very well by giving us a bunch of black protagonists fighting Lovecraftian monsters and cults in the Jim Crow South. Actually, no, they weren't even in the South. They were in like Illinois. But it was still the 50s. And I find it even more satisfying when I remember that H.P. Lovecraft was a raging racist even by the standards of his time. But yeah, the monsters are real and terrifying and a giant obvious metaphor for the racism and racist systems the main characters had to deal with, and that many people today still have to deal with in some form. One of the episodes took place on the day of Emmett Till's funeral, and they're all going to the service. Jordan Peele is not subtle with his themes, and I love it. My only real criticism of that show is that the season finale was way too rushed. That needed at least another half hour. The Witch also did something similar with women and women's power and how people fear and try to control it, thus pushing them into the extremism they're trying to prevent. But The Witch could actually be interpreted a bunch of different ways. That's just the way I saw it. And number 10, the Secret Underworld. This is the cool magical world that exists hidden in plain sight within the normal world. The world of Greek demigods shrouded by the mist. The underground vampire versus werewolf war going on in sewers and back alleys. The fae or supernatural creatures that live just on the edges of civilization. The idea that there is magic that exists in our world, just secret, is very fun and intriguing, which is probably why this genre has remained so popular for so long. Personally, I like seeing how ancient primordial beings react to fast food and memes. I mean, what do they order for themselves on Amazon? How do they take their Starbucks coffee? How do they deal with Karens? It's just really fun seeing the ordinary world we're used to clash and mesh with fantasy, especially when that hidden world stops being hidden. I love it when modern society suddenly has to deal with magic and primordials and trolls and everything else. Fun bit of Cafe Latte lore, which will be explored more in the books than it has been in the series. While the story takes place in the modern day and everyone knows that fairies and vampires and whatnot are real, that is a recent development. Their existence remained largely secret until the 50s and 60s, when cameras and televisions became widely available and hiding just was not an option. That's also one of the reasons why I wrapped up the Fae rights movement with all the other civil rights movements going on at the time. It just made historical, narrative, and thematic sense. Those are my top 10 favorite paranormal tropes. Tell me yours in the comments, as well as some books, movies, or shows that you think we would enjoy. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss any Alonji or Cafe Latte news, and I will see you next time. Bye, lovelies.